Hi y'all, this is Inez with Handmade by Inez. Today I'm doing a My Favorite Things sketch challenge, which you can see here and which I'll also link in the video information below. This is my very first YouTube video, by the way, so I would really love comments and feedback. I thought I would recreate the 5 vertical stripes by using watercolors. I've been really getting back into them lately and I've been playing with them a lot and mixing them a lot and just enjoying them. So I'm going to be doing a rainbow effect on this card using only 5 colors. So as you can see, I started with the red and I'm using my Mijello Mission Gold watercolors and a 1/2 flat brush. I wanted to get the colors on each end in place first because I am a terrible judge of space and I knew I would end up either running out of room or having too much room left on the end of the card. So after I painted the red stripe, I went ahead and did the last color, which was purple, so I could just simply fill in the rest of the colors in between, which you can see me doing here, first with the yellow, and then I'm going to go in with the green, and I believe that was sap green mixed with hooker's green. I don't remember a whole lot of the colors, sorry. This blue, I do remember though, being cerulean blue from Mijello, because it's one of the most amazing colors I've ever seen. Look at that vibrancy, come on. And speaking of vibrancy, I decided I wanted all the other colors to shine just as brightly as that blue is. So I went back over them with less water and more pigment. And in some cases adding a little bit darker color just to make it brighter and pop more. And notice how I'm turning the card upside down and moving it all around in different directions. I'm just trying to get some movement of the color while it's still wet to add some more interest. That's one of the things I love about watercolors is that they kind of have a mind of their own and you can play around with them just by moving them around. And finally the violet color. That was bright clear violet if I'm not mistaken. I'm just really trying to get a lot of color on there and move it around and see if I can get some interesting movement patterns. And finally I just finished the watercoloring by helping it dry a little with my heat gun. I had already decided which stamp sets I wanted to use, and I was playing around with their positioning a little bit before I found a layout that I liked. Here I am inking up the stamps with some Memento Tuxedo Black ink. It didn't need to be waterproof ink at all since the watercolors underneath it were already completely dry, but I really like the crisp image that Memento gives, so that's the ink that I decided to go with for stamping this time. And as you can see, I'm using one of the little mice from the stamp set for the first stripe, just repeating it, not really paying too much attention to positioning because I kind of want the card to have a messy, fun feel, so I like that his little nose sticks off the end of the watercolor stripe there. Next, I'm inking up the stamp that will go over the yellow stripe, and I chose this fairly vertical little sleeping kitten. It turned out only 2 of him would fit on the stripe, but they fit like absolutely perfectly, and that's fine. But then there was nothing left to hang off of the end like I wanted with the little mice, unless I stamped an entire cat below there, which I obviously wasn't going to do. But I guess 4 out of 5 ain't bad, right? Now I'm taking the tiny fish image from the stamp set, and I got to put him on my smallest acrylic block, which makes me really excited. I love this acrylic block, like seriously, it gives you so much precision, and I love using it for tiny little stamps, and I love repeating tiny little stamps, if you can't tell. And then I stamped him so far down that pretty much an entire extra one of him got stamped off the line, which is okay. Like, I like it. I think it looks cute and good for him for getting some extra exposure. Next, I just did the literal exact same thing I've been doing for the first 3 stripes for the last 2 stripes. So I went ahead and hyper sped this up for y'all. As you can see, I used the fishbone stamp for the blue stripe, and I went ahead and used the other little mouse for the purple stripe. And I made sure on both the fishbone and the mouse to have some hanging off. Now this is where my sentiment will go, which is relevant to the sketch challenge, but you're about to see a huge skip. My camera mount fell, and when I set it back up, I didn't realize the ring light was covering like half the lens for like an embarrassing amount of time. So what happened during that large unusable amount of footage is that I actually ended up just setting the sentiments to the side for the time being and decided to add some shading for depth on the little stamped images with my polychromos colored pencil. Sorry, you just got to see a little bit of it. Now I'm just mounting my card into my MISTI so I can stamp the sentiment onto it. I plan on heat embossing it, so I'm prepping the area really well with an anti-static tool first. Next, I line up the sentiment where I want it on my card, um, making sure to be precise as I can and close the lid of my MISTI to adhere the stamp to it. And now I'm inking up the sentiment with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink and getting a cat hair out of the way. And now I'm making sure to press down really evenly on my MISTI, and I use a rag because it helps with the strain on my joints. Now I'm going to pull out the hardboard because it's time to do some heat embossing. I am getting my Ranger Superfine Clear Embossing Powder out, and I have it in a gigantic container because it's probably my most used embossing powder of all time. I really love to use it over VersaFine black ink, especially for sentiments. I think it gives a really crisp and fine, clean look. And next I'm just going to pull out my heat gun and heat emboss this until it turns clear or more black. And it says, "You left a paw print on my heart." So cute. I didn't want just one sentiment, I wanted a pair of them. So I used what at this point feels like my signature move and pulled out a strip I had pre-cut of black cardstock. And I'm going to heat emboss the "I love Mew" sentiment on there. So I'm making sure to prep it really well with an anti-static tool. And I'm going over it with my hand to get some oils on there so it stamps cleanly. And now I'm inking it up very well with the Versamark, and I'm just going to stamp towards the end of the strip. I kind of want to make a little banner effect, and that was definitely inspired by the sketch challenge image. So now I'm taking my Ranger White Detail embossing powder and just coating the sentiment strip a couple times so I can make sure it gets nice and cleanly embossed, especially since the letters are on the thicker side on the sentiment. And now I'm just going to heat emboss it, which actually ended up taking just a couple of seconds, surprisingly. So now I'm going to cut the banner shape, and I'm just going to freehand it. I don't know if there's like a punch or a tool or something that makes this like super easy. I'm relatively new to paper crafting, but I figured it couldn't be too hard to cut two diagonal lines that met at a point, and it wasn't that hard. I then decided where I was going to place the sentiment strip below the original sentiment I had stamped, and I liked it hanging off the side like that, off the edge of the card, so I just made a rough little pencil line so I could chop off the extra paper because I was going to cut it off precisely later. And then I just put one strip of adhesive from my trusty ATG down the middle of the sentiment strip. And I put a little bit of Ranger Multimedia Matte adhesive on the edges of the banner just because the little edges like to come up and I wanted to make sure that they stayed down well. And now I'm just positioning it where I want it, pressing it down, pressing the little ends down. And finally, I am going to chop off that hanging piece of the banner. And the very last thing I needed to do was to adhere the card face to a card base. And so I put ATG all the way around and diagonally because I might like to make sure down the card face, and lined it up really well with the edges of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 top folding white card base in 110-pound cardstock. And there was just a little bit hanging off that wasn't square, so I cut it off there. And that's it for this little cute kitty card. Thank you for watching. And if you'd like to see more content from me, make sure to subscribe and have a wonderful day.